It's very good news right now in the United States. People see it, consumers, businesses, still spending, still lots of money, a lot of fiscal stimulus. But there's a lot of stuff on the horizon, which is bad, and doesn't necessarily, but could put the United States in a recession. That's not the most important thing for what we think about. We'll manage right through that. I would worry much more about the geopolitics of the world today.
You worried about geopolitics? Which side of the geopolitics particularly?
I think the most important thing is the geopolitics, what's going on in Russia, Ukraine, America, China, the relationships of the Western world, and that would have me far more concerned than whether there's a mild or slightly severe recession.
If you look at the current difficulties that we're facing, and particularly financial difficulties that are likely to last several years as we unwind the decade of cheap money and so forth, is it difficult to convince publics, to populations, that we are on the right track when they see such lurches? I mean, let's take US interest rates, which are going to go to the high. There's an entire generation of population that's never seen that level of interest rate before. Now, people around this table have seen much higher.
Yeah, I don't think, Richard, we're unwinding 10 years. I think we're unwinding 40 years. I think, candidly, we privatized fixed income. We nationalized fixed income markets around the world for a variety of reasons. Central banks nationalized fixed income markets, and we're now going through a process of privatizing them again. And that's disruptive. I mean, as Jamie said, if we have a significant recession in the US or elsewhere in the world, we will work through that. But as we work through and we think about where we are, different kinds of decisions will have to be made to get different results when you look 5 to 10 years forward. And that's something that takes time. There aren't easy answers. There's not a silver bullet. It takes time to work through. And it takes adjustment. And candidly, we're going through an adjustment after a very long period of time of the world, at least from a macro or a monetary policy perspective, working a certain way.
On that point, Governor, the issue of working through will be painful. And populations, citizens, will become disillusioned. And not surprisingly, there is a large number of people who say, the system did not work for me. Therefore, we either go extreme or we check out. That's a concern.
I mean, checking out is not a solution. Extreme is not a solution, too.
But there are risks.
Globalization and the geo-economics is happening now because of weaponizing some of the things that we shouldn't be touching. What happened between many countries by banning, certain products and services and these kind of things, instead of the expansion in the economies that we have witnessed in the past 2 decades, now we're going backward instead of moving forward. Every country now has to have its full supply chain.
Just maybe a comment on the availability of making investment decisions these days. And we always say for investment decision, you need stability. You need fiscal stability. You need regulatory fiscality. And what is happening post this war is that market design questions are many. People and governments are talking about and actually implementing and doing market interventions measures. They are disrupting quite a bit the fiscal stability of the system, which really poses some interesting challenges for us as industrial investors, particularly on the energy side. So I think it's going to be very important that we try to overcome the current short-term hurdles and start to anticipate how this will all settle down so we can have more visibility and more stability on market designs, fiscal regimes, so we can go back to doing our business.
Let's take the UK. Hardly stable.
I think you have to understand the mechanics, the cause-effect. It's a very basic thing. When you produce a larger deficit, you have to sell your bonds. You have to know who the buyers of the bonds are. If you don't have enough buyers of the bonds, you're going to have a buyer's strike, so they're going to sell off. And this is, I think, what happened in the UK is a canary in the coal mine. That if you take what's happening in Europe as a whole, the level of interest rates relative to the level of the inflation rates, and the terrible choice that has to be made about if you raise interest rates, what does that mean to Italy's debt service payments? Who is going to make up that difference? There's just mechanics to this. So I think that we are in a situation generally where there's not coordination.
Really what you're all talking about, and you've been quite open about, is geopolitical risk and geostrategic issues. For you, Jamie, which is the most significant in the world at the moment?
It's Russia, Ukraine, and the effect it has on the relationship of America and China. I think you have to take a step back here. The world and mankind, and Ray mentioned it, has been getting better and better century after century after century in terms of life, people not living in poverty, people not in childbirth, not dying in childbirth, et cetera. And that trend isn't stopping yet. I think February 24th was a massive pivot change in the world. It kind of woke us up, this illusion that the Western world had that somehow peace is at hand and you don't have to really worry about it. That was a mistake. And around that immediately is, national security, is energy security, is food security. And it's perfectly reasonable that countries say, how can I protect myself by diversifying my supply chains, et cetera. But at the root of all this, in my view, is American leadership. If you don't have strong American leadership, and not ugly American leadership, not our way or the highway, but just as a coalescing thing for the Western world, you're going to have chaos like you see in Ukraine. And this nuclear blackmail is probably the worst thing that we've seen in our lifetimes. And it's also teaching the rest of the world it's okay. So if we're not sitting here in a couple hundred years, it'll be nuclear proliferation. It's not going to be climate change.